If you've been shopping for the latest, greatest, most reliable car in the market today, you've probably been looking at both a Toyota as well as a Honda, and you probably wonder which one in fact is more reliable. Well, things have changed a lot in the last few years, and a lot of it has to do with the innovation, the latest technology, and trying to be competitive in the modern day market with a lot of great competition. Drivetrains produce more power, make more efficiency, and consume less fuel. There's more safety features. All of that additional electronics and technology can impact its overall reliability. So I'm going to get in today, explain which vehicle is actually more reliable, the Toyota brand or the Honda brand, share with you some of the rankings, give you some examples of some of the most and least reliable vehicles, so hopefully it helps you make the right car buying purchase if in fact reliability is your number one priority. Well, reliability is essentially the longer you can go between major mechanical services. We're not talking about standard maintenance. Every vehicle needs oil services, brakes, tires. Remember, longevity and reliability aren't always exactly the same things. Sometimes vehicles are built with staying power, they're built of low cost parts, so they're easy to maintain and they'll last a long time, maybe because they're hardily built. So you may not have to spend a lot of money, but when it hits, poof, it could be big and ugly. But they can often live together. Many of these vehicles, Toyotas and Hondas, are both reliable as well as they're built to last a long time. And that's what we'll talk about, which one of these vehicles is actually in fact more reliable. So Repair Pal basically says your average Toyota ranks about 4 out of 5 stars in terms of overall reliability. It's also number 8 out of 32 for all car brands. And you can literally expect only pay about $441 annually for your typical servicing costs. And on top of that, only 0.3 times per year would you expect this thing to actually hit the shop for unexpected repairs. What that basically means is once every 3 years you might expect an unexpected repair to go into the shop for one of these Toyota models. Honda, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Honda also ranks based on Repair Pal statistics as 4 out of 5, so they particularly love these vehicles as well. And also only makes about 0.3 trips per year, which is pretty much the same thing as your average Toyota, meaning every 3 years you would expect something more or less unexpected in terms of repairs. This one also has a relatively low annual service cost of about $428 per year to keep these vehicles on the road. So both the Honda as well as the Toyota are built to run low cost of servicing, low cost in fuel, where most of these can get either 30 to 40 miles per gallon if you're driving them moderately, depending on the drivetrain, as well as insurance costs are relatively affordable. Parts are relatively cheap too, making them easy to maintain, easy to service. For example, brakes on this Toyota Camry are very small. If you look in there, they're basically a ventilated brake, low cost to maintenance and service. Of course, we have a small brake caliper too, and those are also relatively cheap to change the pad. Same thing over Honda. Honda often has small discs like this. Unless you're getting to the R models, what we're dealing is a very small disc here and also a single pot caliper piston right there. And that of course will mean low cost to change brakes, where you might only have to pay about $700 or $800 for a set of discs all the way around and the pads to mount in the calipers. That would also typically apply for most Toyota products like this as well. A lot of the same thing applies under the hood. So in a modern day Toyota Camry like this, you have a relatively low cost piece of maintenance, air filter. Costs you 25 bucks. A smaller battery than you might find in larger vehicles like a modern day Mercedes like that. What you're gonna have is a vehicle like this that's gonna be easy to replace a battery for 100 bucks instead of a $300 battery like you might find in there. You also have other parts that are easy to service. Coolant lines like this that are crimped on snugly with this beautiful one tension clamp, very dependable. Simple, low cost parts, effective, and they work, they're reliable. Here's your oil dipstick and there's your oil for an oil change. An oil change on this car will literally only cost you about $120 all in, oil, filter, and labor. That vehicle over there is going to cost you likely more like $400 to get an oil service done. There's also no turbos in here. This is a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder making just over 200 horsepower, 2.5 liter, simple, unchanged for many years, and it's good to go. Very reliable. What about the Honda? Well, this is an older Honda. We're looking at a 2012 model year here, and this one is also easy to service. Oil changes, same thing, that costs $130 for an oil service, easy access to check your levels, a cheap air filter that might cost you 30 bucks, and again, a small battery that might cost you only 100 bucks instead of the $400 Mercedes special. Also, great clamps, easy systems to change your cooling hoses and keep those parts in good operating order. Easy access for a lot of the parts like this means that labor costs are down as well, and access even to things like alternators and auxiliary belts like down there mean that everything is accessible, low cost for servicing and maintenance. And so if cars are easy to service, low cost parts, that just means you're more likely to replace the parts and keep the vehicle on the road. If you're more likely to do that, it's probably going to last a lot longer, and if you're doing your servicing, because it doesn't cost you a lot more money, it's going to add to the reliability. So which one of these is in fact more reliable because of the service costs? Now when researching which is the most reliable car brand, you have to consider the longest lasting vehicles are always a little bit of an indication. So I like to reference ECPP.com, and they talk about vehicles in a top 10 list that are capable of making it over 200,000 miles. Well, did you know right there, as a Toyota is known to have 6 of the top 10 that make it over 200,000 miles. That's right. In fact, there are certain models that are even more impactful. The Toyota Land Cruiser is good for about 18.2% of them make it over 200,000 miles, and 14.2% of Toyota Sequoias actually make it over 200,000 miles as well, and they're the leading units for long-lasting vehicles in the Toyota genre. So incidentally, other vehicles that cap out that list in Toyotas are also the 4Runner, the Prius, the Avalon, and of course the Tundra, famous for long-lasting lifestyle. Consumers Reports actually claims that the Toyota Camry, and specifically the hybrid version, is known for the best, most reliable car on all of its entire list. These are ultra bulletproof and durable as can be, so reliable is this brand Toyota. But we also can't forget about Honda, because Honda is an ultra reliable brand, and as such, would you believe it, unfortunately iSeeCars.com states that only 2 Hondas make that list for vehicles that will go over 200,000 miles, one of them being the Ridgeline and the other one being the Odyssey, likely because they're typically carrying larger engines and they're driven in such a fashion that they're likely to be lolling along on high mileage runs. Now, interestingly enough, RepairPal actually states the top Honda to be a higher ranker than the top Toyota. As a matter of fact, RepairPal states the Honda HR-V is the most reliable Honda available, and it actually ranks a 5 out of 5 star based on RepairPal statistics. RepairPal seems to favor cars like the Hondas, whereas iSeeCars.com as well as Consumers Report tend to favor more of the Toyota brands, as well as Lexus and of course Mazda too, rounding out that top. But have things actually changed in the last few years? We do know that Toyota as well as Honda have historically both been very, very reliable. This older generation of Honda, like we see right here, actually has a tried and true 1.8 liter 4-cylinder engine, and yes, there's no turbos. There's the exhaust side, no turbos, no extra power. It makes a meager 140 and change horsepower. So in other words, it's not powerful, but it's economically fuel efficient, and it's peppy, and as well as super reliable. And of course, this is from a generation when they did believe in reliability. This also uses a torque converter transmission, 6-speed style, and of course everything's plain, simple, and functional. Front wheel drive, in other words, only the front wheel's clawing away, and of course that just means ultra simple, ultra effective, and easy to wear, easy to service parts that are ultra reliable. Toyota, on the other hand, obviously what we have there is a different scenario. We have now all-wheel drive, but historically a lot of Toyotas have been either front-wheel or rear-wheel drive in different configurations. Toyota has consistently stuck with what they know. 2.5 liter, what we see here, has been an old staple in their barnyard. Right here, they love this tried and true, as well as the 3.5 liter V6 that you can get in some of these vehicles as an upgrade to a Toyota Camry. Good for 250, 300, 350,000 miles all day long. Either way, whether you get the 4-cylinder or the V6, and they've stuck with that engine for a long, long time, making Toyota very reliable, whereas Honda, on the other hand, have made some changes in recent years that have unfortunately impacted not just their longevity, but their reliability in some applications. Now, instead of having that 1.8 liter 4-cylinder, now they've got some engines, 2.4 liter 4-cylinder, which is good, but now they also have a 1.5 liter turbo 4-cylinder in certain models, and of course, unfortunately, that 1.5 liter engine has had some problems. Some of the issues with some of the modern day Hondas have been oil and fuel dilution. In other words, because of the way it's configured, too much fuel when the engine's cold tends to get past the piston rings, winds up in the oil, dilutes it, breaks it down, and can potentially cause bottom of the engine issues. Rod bearings and all kinds of different parts will wash away from the oil, which is the oil is there to lubricate and protect. If you wash it away, it's not going to help. Gas is essentially a solvent, and that'll wash away all of these oily surfaces. You don't want that. That has been a bit of an impact. Now, there have been some changes to that that, and Honda's found ways to mitigate with some different oiling updates. They've also changed some tuning and as well made some recommendations. Cold starts, don't drive it hard when it's cold, change the overall operation, more frequent oil changes, has sort of mitigated some of the fuel and oil dilution issues, but unfortunately, because of the innovation trying to make more power with smaller engines that are not much more than something you find in a kit car or even possibly that steel backpack blower or your John Deere lawnmower, that sadly is what's happening, is they're trying to make too much power with too little engine, and that's what they're starting to feel. Honda's also had some more issues with the CVT, the continuously variable transmission, rather than what you're typically finding in a lot of modern day Toyotas. Have had some transmission problems, but it doesn't seem to be quite as prevalent in a lot of Toyotas as it is in a lot of the Hondas. So a lot of people would basically say that Hondas are far more enjoyable to drive, that they feel more spirited and more sporty, and in most cases that's probably true. Although with that said, Toyota is now changing the game a little bit. Think about some of their GR models. The GR Corolla is a hot little 3-cylinder turbo engine. It's going to make a lot of fun. For sure the Supra, which is a BMW based engine, that's fun. The GR86, lots of fun. That's basically a Subaru engine. So they're starting to introduce different technology, whether it's turbocharging engines in the Supra or the Corolla, whether it's actually using the flat engine from a previous Subaru design bucket. They're definitely dipping into the technology. They're trying different things. And that's where I think the tables could be turning, as we start to see right now in front of us. Toyota is historically stuck with things that they know, things that are reliable. But now they're starting to change to try to be competitive with brands like Honda. Honda's trying to be a little more innovative. And unfortunately, that could potentially impact the reliability of Toyota. So enough about just silly statistics. We've had Toyotas, Hondas, a variety of a lot of these different models in our family for numbers of years, and I've had friends with different versions and models as well, and there's some different conclusions I'm going to draw, and I want to share some of those things because I think both of them have had issues over the years. For example, I found a lot of Honda issues tend to be more related to alignment issues. We've had brakes that have locked up calipers, issues there. It feels like the brakes are a little fragile. We do notice a lot more pulling, and even just the steering wheel seems to be off center a little bit for no reason. We've never hit any curbs. Also on top of that, we get more pulsating from brakes. You hit the brakes a couple of times hard, slowing down emergency stop, and we've had brake related issues. Now electrics, we've had no problems in most of the Hondas that we've ever rolled with, but we also do find that we don't like the service model related to Hondas like this as much either. We don't feel like they're treating us quite as fairly at the dealers. We had a recent experience taking our vehicle into a local Honda dealership and we got greased. They started throwing generic terms like service brakes and some other generic terms and tacked on a whole pile of dollars. At the end of the day, all we really got was an oil change, air filters, tire rotation, and a brake service for $800. What is that? That's not a BMW. That's not an Audi. We were blown away by that. That was highly disgusting. But on the other hand, Toyota has had some problems too. We all know about the sudden acceleration issues with certain models. We know about the Denso fuel pumps, which have been a problem for certain models. We also know that certain models of Toyota or Lexus have had issues related to bad castings in the engine, which could essentially weep coolant through the sides of the block, which meant potential fire hazard or potential oil leaks or any of the above. It was a problematic series of engines that Toyota and Lexus had created in a relatively small number. Both Toyota and Honda have their misses, but they are reliable. So if you're going to pick one, let's face it, it's still going to be far more reliable than a lot of its competition. Think about some of the other brands from GM and Ford and Dodge. Trash in terms of reliability compared to these two brands. However, these aren't perfect either. And they will cost you some money to keep them on the road. So don't forget about maintenance. So mechanically, they're both quite reliable, the older generation Honda, but the new generations have changed. They also use soy wiring and the rodent population get in there, and that causes problems with some of the electrics long term. The interior of these vehicles are very simple and the plastics are quite cheap for the most part. I mean, just look at this. You have Tupperware type container. You essentially have a tackle box right here on wheels. Lots of plastic. Just a tiny bit of fabric here, but lots of plastic everywhere. It feels like a Fisher-Price toy. And the same thing goes throughout the dashboard. Lots of plastic spread throughout this vehicle. And the Toyota also has a lot of plastic, and this is a newer generation, of course, going to look a little different than the older generation Honda. But here, lots of plastic. Lots of plastic everywhere here. Very simplistic. Also lots of plastic throughout the dashboard here. One thing to mention on reliability, right there, that failed on us already. With 3,000 kilometers on the clock, this stopped working. The audio stopped working on that. We had the display, but the radio stopped outputting. So there was a problem already with relatively low miles. Overall experiences, if you want a reliable car, you really can't go too wrong with either one of these brands. They both had a few misses along the way. But the bottom line is, well, I have to mention, based on consumers' reports, have you seen the latest ranking? Number 1, Toyota for overall reliability. Number 2, of course, is Lexus. 3 is BMW. Take that with a grain of salt. Honda ranks with consumers' reports as number 5 for overall reliability, making Toyota likely the more reliable option than Honda, as simplicity is the key with Toyotas, and go with what you know. They don't change a lot of their drivetrains. They stick with what's working. They don't make drastic changes. They slowly transition new technology in, but they don't get as aggressive with the new tech and performance as the Honda brand typically does. And with all of that said, right there, you're gonna love it. That's not talking about reliability as much as how long each one of these will last, which one will win the durability game, and which one will literally last over 300,000 miles. Toyota and Honda. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll catch you all real soon. Bye-bye.